The CIA triad is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You might on some of the other courseware see it as AIC, but throughout this course we're going to use CIA. And I'm going to trust in your ability to understand that's not the Central Intelligence Agency, but referring to the CIA triad. I will only once use the CIA as the Central Intelligence Agency, and I'll let you know when that is. When we look at confidentiality, this is what most people think IT security is. We keep our secrets secret and only allow authorized people to have access to the data. But just as important, if not even more important, is the integrity of the data. How do we know someone didn't alter our data? Most of the time when our confidentiality has been breached, we know. We can do something about it. If it's credit cards that were stolen, we can notify the people they can get new credit cards. But if someone has altered our data, we might not know. In my mind, that can be a lot more dangerous. And then finally, availability. We need to ensure that the data is available to the people that need it when they need it. And that really is the balancing act. Having enough of all these three and making them work together. Looking at data, it has three states. Data at rest, that's not being used, it's just sitting on a disk somewhere. Data in motion, that's being sent over the network or on the internet. And then data in use, we're actively using it on a workstation. For data in rest, we want to use encryption. The data is just sitting there, it's not being used for anything, and the couple of milliseconds it's going to take to decrypt when it's actually being used, it's not going to have a big impact. We want to do the same for data in motion. We still want to use encryption, but it will be different types of encryption, different types of protocols. We want to ensure the confidentiality of the data while we're sending it over the internet, or even if we're sending it on our internal network. The encryption is going to make it slightly bit slower, but it is part of our defense in depth. Defense in depth is really what it sounds like. It's also sometimes called onion defense. It's overlapping layers of defense that protects your asset against an attack. Even if one countermeasure by itself doesn't do it, the combination of all the countermeasures you have will make you much more secure. Finally, we have data in use. Since we're actively using the data, we can't encrypt it, but we can still build security policies and rules around how we handle the data. This could be something like a clean desk policy. Because data is not just the data on the computer, it's also printed out copies of it. So if you're not actively using the documents you printed out right now, they should either be locked away or they should be destroyed. We would have rules about shoulder surfing. No one's allowed to stand behind you while you're accessing confidential information. We can install view angle protectors. It's going to make the monitor of the person using the computer a little darker, but if someone's sitting right in front of the computer, they can see everything fine, but someone sitting 20 or 30 degrees on the outside of that will not be able to read what's on the monitor. A lot of what we do with data in use is really user training. They need to be taught how to use the data when they're accessing it, what's acceptable and what's not. For a lot of people, this is really boring, so we need to spruce it up a little bit. We need to make it exciting, or at least something that's relevant to them. And then outside of the training and awareness, we again have our defense in depth. We have strong passwords. We have multi-factor authentication. We have masking. We have access control. And we can use controls like need to know or least privilege. Like many other security terms here, they are exactly what they sound to be. If we have a need-to-know policy, even if you have access to the data, you can get to it. That doesn't mean you're allowed to. You need to have a need to know. And the same with least privilege. We're giving our employees exactly the privilege they need to do their jobs and nothing else. There are a lot of different threats to our confidentiality. They can try to break our encryption. But much easier it is if they can use social engineering. Why spend months and months trying to crack a password if you can ask someone for it nicely? Or they can use keyloggers. Those can be both hardware and software. It's basically a little program that records every keystroke on the PC. So when you go to type your username and password in, they can see what it is. Or they can use cameras to record you from across the street. We want that comprehensive risk approach where all the countermeasures kind of work together in unison. They enhance each other. If an attacker somehow was able to record your keyboard because we didn't secure the windows or they would cover them in a film they couldn't see through, then another countermeasure could be that people aren't allowed to log in from IPs from the outside. So even though we're compromised, they still can't attack us. They would obviously then try to gain access to our internal network, where more defense in depth, more countermeasures would be in place. You see what I mean when I'm calling it an onion defense? Every layer you peel away, there's another layer beneath it, and another layer, and another layer. And that keeps going until you get to the center of what they want, until they get to the data. There's no system that's completely safe. That's not the point. The point is to protect our data good enough, well enough, to not make it an appealing target. Because if we truly have defense in depth, if we have that well-designed system, then there are much easier targets to go after out there, and we won't be that. And there are obviously many more attack vectors they can use to get to our confidentiality or to break it. But one of the newer ones, the one that's getting a lot of attention right now, is the Internet of Things. All the smart devices, all the smart things we have that connects to the Internet. You may have great defense in depth for your regular systems, for all these things that you think normally is what we want to protect. But if an attacker can get to a smart TV in a conference room and then stage an attack on your network, a lot of the other defenses don't matter. We might be great about passing systems and servers and network equipment, but if there's a vulnerability on another thing connected to our network, if the smart devices we have are not segmented off on their own network, that's an easy way to get in. So we need that holistic approach where we look at all our devices, all the entry points into our system, and use all that knowledge to ensure we have the security posture we need. For the integrity piece, we still use cryptography, but then we'll also use checksums and message digests, or hashes. They in themselves don't provide any security, but they can show if the data has been altered or not. We would also use digital signatures. Since I encrypted the file with my private key, it's safe to assume that it came from me, which then also provides non-repudiation. I can't say it didn't come from me because you can prove it did. And for the integrity, we would also use access controls. I think some of the points being made right now in the IT security community that integrity might be as important or even more important than confidentiality is true, because we don't know that we've been compromised. We don't know they're changing our data. One of the biggest attacks that I know of where the integrity of the data was attacked was the Stuxworm. It was very specifically designed to attack Iranian uranium enrichment plants, causing the centrifuges to spin just a little bit faster, breaking them at a slightly higher rate, not enough to cause enough attention to begin with, but also slowing the program down significantly. The intent of the worm was to do exactly that, just change the integrity of the data slightly and cripple the program. There are a lot of different attacks on our integrity, and we'll cover those a lot more in depth later. For now, just understand why the integrity of our data is so important. Then there's the last leg of the CIA triad, we have availability. This one's by far the most noticeable. We know when we're down. We know when our servers are not working, when the website's down. Over the years, most of the attacks that have been targeted on our availability have been driven by costs or driven by your beliefs, but just like any other attack, it's getting monetized. Attackers attack a couple of companies to show they have the capability to bring them down, and then they contact others. If you don't pay us whatever amount of money, we can do that to you too. So as a countermeasure, we can use intrusion detection or prevention systems. They are exactly what they sound like. Intrusion detection system detects an attack and alerts someone but doesn't do anything, and the intrusion prevention system does the same, but it also reacts to the attack. It might send the traffic off into a black hole, it blocks the traffic coming in. Whatever it does is determined by how we set it up and the policies were made for it. We also very actively want to be patching our systems. The Equifax breach, where the attacker stole 143 million social security numbers, could have been completely avoided. There are multiple things that they did wrong, and they had just done one of them, nothing of this would have happened. One of those was patch management. The vendor issued a patch 2 months before the attack. The upside to that is we can now fix it. The downside is the attackers know the vulnerability is there. If Equifax had done their due diligence and due care, they ought to research the patches and then applied them. This wouldn't have happened. But availability is not just malicious things. Stuff just breaks. So for all the stuff that can break, we want redundancy. So each server we have should have multiple power supplies, which should be connected to redundant UPSs, which then in turn is connected to redundant generators. On the disks we use RAID. The network traffic is sent again through redundant network cards to separate switches, and again that has a redundant path out to the network. So there's no single point of failure that should be able to bring our system down. We also want redundant HVACs. I once worked in a data center where one of the HVACs died and the other two left was not enough to keep up with the heat outside. The temperature in the data center just rose and rose, and we just by luck and narrowly avoided having to shut the whole data center down to prevent damage to the equipment. We want to do that in-depth analysis. What if this happens? What if this happens? And eliminate all the single points of failure. And for our vendors, we would have SLAs, service level agreements, where they would guarantee a certain uptime. If they don't, then there's consequences. How aggressive that service agreement is depends on what we're protecting. If we're okay with our website being down an hour or two every so often, we probably wouldn't have a very aggressive SLA on those. Again, the more aggressive, the more costly it is. But if we're down for an hour and we lose $100,000, this is somewhere we want to invest that money. There are many different things that can affect our availability. Some of them are malicious, some of them are not. Regardless of what they are, we need to protect against them. We put in the countermeasures to make sense. Part of what you also need to do as an IT security professional You need to be able to convey to senior management what makes sense and what doesn't. In many organizations, they have very limited IT background. So if you ask them, how much uptime do we want? They're going to tell you we want uptime all the time. We never want any downtime, which they can have. But are they okay with the price tag? It could be a couple of $100,000 just for a web server. So be prepared to explain to them why and why not. Give them the numbers they can understand. Tell them that if they want 99.9999% uptime, it's going to be $100,000. But if they're okay with 99.99, it's going to be $5,000. Explain to them how much the difference is in minutes or hours. Give them something they can relate to, and then allow them to make the decision. We're going to go back to that over this course, but understand that senior leadership is ultimately liable, but they also make all the decisions. You're there to advise them, and that is your role on this exam too. You're an IT security manager or a risk advisor. Answer all the questions from that point of view. Ask yourself, what would an IT manager do in this scenario? Finding the right mix of confidentiality, availability, and integrity is the cornerstone of IT security professionals. If we have too much of one, some of the other controls will suffer. If we have too much confidentiality, the availability might suffer. Again, if we have too much integrity, the availability will suffer. And if we have too much availability, the other two, confidentiality and integrity, will suffer. So finding that right mix is really important. I would also know the opposites of the CIA triad. The opposites is DAD. Disclosure, alteration, and destruction. This is what we're protecting against. We don't want someone to get access to our information. We don't want it disclosed. We don't want them to alter our data. And we don't want them to destroy our systems or the data it's housed on, or disrupt the availability of it. Pretty much everything we do ties back to this. And understanding the concepts of this domain will help you tremendously on the other domains. You understand how it ties back to this, why we're doing it, what it is we're protecting.